I'm somebody who has been enamored with the horror genre since a very young age. I believe I can consider myself an adept in horror at this point. Some of my favorite horror movies include 2016's The Autopsy of Jane Doe, 2022's Smile, 2018's Hereditary, and of course, my all-time favorite, 1982's John Carpenter's The Thing. My mom has always been a fan of Dean Koontz and Stephen King, so I've had a plethora of their books around me and had a chance to read their classics. But my favorite books include a recent title I've read, Marcus Kleiwer's We Used to Live Here, Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves, Junji Ito's Tomie, and though I don't own the book, The Enigma of Amigara Fault. I even have Vincent V. Cava's Pastel-Colored Dreams and Human-Flavored Nightmares, Mr. Creepypasta's Collection Volume 1, as well as A Lonely Broadcast Volume 1 and 2 by Kel Byron. When it comes to what I like to focus on this channel, video games, I've had tons of different experiences with all the various genres developers try. Atmospheric horror, survival horror, mascot horror, existential horror, and even comedy horror. I bring all this up because there is one type of horror that I would like to bring to everyone's attention. I played a few games that I would categorize as this genre, and they all really fascinated me. I'd like to unofficially dub this genre cozy horror. The kind of horror that makes you drop your guard until you get a swift reminder that, oh right, this is a horror game. To give some examples, we have the ever-classic Doki Doki Literature Club, the recently acclaimed Me-Side, and the subject of this video, Little Goody Two Shoes. I'm willing to bet that if I hadn't explicitly said so, you would have no clue that this is a horror game. What's even better is that it's not just a horror game, but a horror dating simulator. That's precisely why it falls into this cozy horror archetype, as despite the cutesy aesthetics and heartwarming dating events, it gets genuinely unsettling at times. I feel like having the cute anime aesthetics and dating simulator elements helps elevate the horror aspects as you let your guard down until you're being chased by a monster. Now, I went into this game completely blind. I had just happened to stumble upon it as I was browsing for horror games to play, and as soon as I laid my eyes on the quite unique and frankly gorgeous art style, I knew I had to play this game for myself. That old school, sort of retro anime art style really drew me in and helped it stand out among other games labeled horror. It's extremely reminiscent of anime from the 90s, like Sailor Moon, The Slayers, Cardcaptor Sakura, and Saint Tail. The sharp faces and large eyes, combined with the overall colorful and delicately crafted designs, it's just so nice to look at, and the characters are all so striking and unique. I digress though. On a whim, I decided to try the demo, and just a few minutes into it, I knew I had to buy it and give it a full playthrough. I always say the best games are the ones you just randomly stumble upon, and let's just say I was not prepared for what this game had in store. I've played through it twice, and let me tell you, the story goes places. In fact, I actually rewrote many sections of this script after my second playthrough because of some pretty insane revelations during the true ending. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Strap in as we dive into the magical world of AstralShift's Little Goody Two Shoes. Something quite beautiful about this game is that it's developed by AstralShift, a small studio based in Portugal, and published by the Square Enix collective based in the UK. The opening you just heard, Ruby Red Shoes, is sung in Japanese by Diana Garnett, an extremely talented American singer and voice actor who also voices the main character Elise. The cherry on top, the game itself takes place in 18th century Germany. I know at least one person will find that deeply interesting. This game feels like a perfect love letter to all those old-school RPG Maker horror games like Ao Oni and, most poignantly, The Witch's House. While it itself is not running off an RPG Maker engine, the feel is very much there and is a must-play for any who are a fan of that style. One of the many things this game does so well is the atmosphere and sound design, as well as the soundtrack. I occasionally found myself just standing still listening to the ambiance and soaking in the beautiful art. I could close my eyes and physically imagine myself in the world. And as someone with aphantasia, I think that proves just how good the sound design truly is. I feel it's all the subtle sounds the environment makes that really helps in immersing you in this world. Sounds like the chirping of the birds, the ambient hum of insects, to the creaking of the protagonist Elise's house, and even the soothing babble of the creek she crosses to get to Kieferberg. I also cannot stress how phenomenal the music in this game is. It really had such a unique feel to it, and I really can't put my finger on what you could classify the genre as. It was reminiscent of folk music and old-school games. Most likely what they were going for with the art style choice. The songs that score the day's events and the witching hour are all really great and set the tone perfectly. When walking around Kieferberg doing the daily tasks, I felt like I was transported to the 18th century time period they were attempting to portray. Along with the score changing as the day passes, each of the three love interests have their own themes that accentuate and sell their personalities. Let's once again not forget that this is a horror game, and the discordant melodies during the witching hour set my hair on end. Also, there are these almost musical-esque moments where the game just breaks into song. It's so random, and I love it. I digress though. I personally find that the way the game plays with light is what really heightens the atmosphere, which is already top-notch with the 3D sound design. At night or during the witching hour sections, if you don't have your lantern on, it's pitch black, your vision being limited to only a small radius around Elise. The monster designs, for how simplistic they are, blend so well with the art style and are quite unsettling in their own right. However, one of my favorite horror bits in this game is when you die to certain monsters, you'll be met with these pseudo-jump scares. As Elise perishes, you'll see flashing images of her death in this really unique porcelain doll style. I still get chills from these. They're so unique and just really cool. Before fully diving into the gameplay, I want to talk about the story, as while the gameplay is certainly fun, the story is what kept me engaged. You play as a poor, steadfast young lady named Elise. Our story begins as we see Elise as a young baby, found and taken in by an old woman named Holly. This small, innocuous detail is very important, as, unlike everyone else, Elise wasn't born in Kieferberg. We see her grow up before our eyes and see just how close to Grandma Holly she got. However, as luck would have it, Holly is taken from Elise before her adventure begins. Holly gives her an emerald brooch and passes away. Elise is heartbroken, but must be strong in her absence. Not even 5 minutes into this game, and I'm already tearing up. Wow. At this point, I immediately knew that this game was going to be something special. Living in the small, highly religious town of Kieferberg is quaint but hard. Elise works tirelessly as a maid of all trades to put bread in her stomach each day. It's an exhausting cycle, one that many of us can relate to, I'm sure. But she has 3 lovely women who keep her going. Freya, the friendly neighborhood farmhand and daughter of the mayor, Lebkuchen, the devout nun and baker whose name translates to gingerbread from German to English, and Rosenmarine, along with her goat Flock. She's a mysterious and eclectic traveler who seems to believe that her arrival at Elise's doorstep is fate. Though her life is simple, Elise strives for something greater. To leave Kieferberg, to live in a beautiful castle and be wealthy enough so she never has to worry about food and work. Let's take a second to talk about the religion the townsfolk worship. Saint Walpurga. Saint Walpurga is a real German saint who is said to ward off farm pests, illnesses like rabies and the whooping cough, but also witches. Seems these developers really did their research, which I can appreciate. I mention this as one faithful day, the townsfolk begin to cry about a witch. And since Elise is housing Rosenmarine in her home, people, or at least Old Man Jochin, get suspicious of her. At night, something begins to call to Elise. Entities not of this world. Is this the witch, or something else entirely? Either way, something is definitely in the woods, and it craves Elise's attention. Elise must keep the suspicion of the townsfolk down while also investigating what the cause of these strange otherworldly occurrences are. I'll be diving into spoilers a bit later, especially involving him, so if this sounds interesting so far, I implore you to just go play the game for yourself. I'll put a spoiler warning up before, but it'll be after I talk about the gameplay, should you want a bit more convincing before buying this game. What's super interesting about this story is since the townsfolk suspect Elise of being the witch, it really feels like you're the villain in this story. But at the same time, you also feel for Elise. She is an outsider, quite literally, as her home is secluded far from Kieferberg proper. Let's also not forget that she wasn't born in Kieferberg. So with everything you do during the night portions, the witching hour, it all kind of points to you causing the occurrences in town. It's very possible that you'll begin to think maybe Elise is the witch. However, the more you play, you also see that the townsfolk are quite rude to Elise, for no other reason than the fact that she's an outsider. To speak frankly, Elise is kind of a haughty asshole at times. We see this firsthand when Elise finds Rosenmarine in her chicken coop and proceeds to accuse her of ransacking her house, all the while beating poor Rosenmarine with a broom. But she's not all that bad when you get to know her. I think it's a fine case of the people around her that gave her this prickly exterior. I mean, imagine if you lived in a town where everyone treated you like an outsider. They also suffer from a horrible case of the bystander effect. When Old Man Jochin is accusing Elise of being the witch, many of the townsfolk will blindly follow his word. Ironic that they also blindly follow their religion here. Even the ones who trust Elise and know that she is completely innocent just stand by, not saying a word while these confrontations are happening. The only townsfolk that will actively defend Elise are Lebkuchen and Freya, most likely because they too are sort of seen as outsiders. It's no coincidence that they appear to Elise as hallucinations during the witching hour events. I actually didn't know this until doing research for this video, but this game is actually a prequel to AstralShift's first game, Pocket Mirror. In that game, you can find a book titled Little Goody Two Shoes, and it reads as follows. I once lived in a small village when I was young. My youth was spent in hard labor and cold, sleepless nights. I often dreamt of a better future, one that could fill my stomach with luxurious sweets and thick, expensive steaks. One day I heard an old woman talking about a strange rumor. She said that a certain someone has been granting wishes in the woods to anyone who dared summon a certain name. Someone who wasn't quite human. Sound familiar? I kind of wonder if they had all this planned from the start, or if this book spawned the game. Either way, the connection is pretty obvious. With the story out of the way, it's time to discuss the gameplay. The game is pretty linear, divided into day and night sections. Each day you will have a story quest to do, but you can also help the townsfolk out by playing little mini-games. These mini-games are really simple, but really fun. They're also done in this unique pixel art style. Some of the tasks include helping collect eggs in Chicken Frenzy, my personal favorite, cutting firewood in Chop Chop Chop, and collecting apples in It's Raining Apples. Helping people will reward you with Teifel, the currency of this town, and depending on how well you do in the mini-games, the higher your reward will be. You can rank from D, which will net you a measly 20 Teifel, all the way up to S, which will score you 20 Teifel. The more money you have, the more food you can buy, and believe me, food is a very important mechanic. As the day progresses, Elise will get hungry, and you'll have to keep her fed and healthy or she'll pass out from exhaustion, resulting in a game over. I know it's a mechanic a few people complain about, but I quite enjoy the difficulty of having to balance Elise's hunger and deciding whether to purchase food for her or buy something to ease her sanity. The game also gives you all the supplies and tools you'll need to succeed. It's just all about resource management and knowing how and when to spend your Teifel. Plus, if you can remember to visit Lebkuchen in front of her bakery, she'll give you 2 pieces of bread each evening. It really gives the game a little bit more depth and keeps it from being too monotonous, you know? It's also one of the many mechanics that works in tandem to make a fun, tricky, yet deeply satisfying gameplay loop. On top of everything, it also makes Elise a relatable character. I'm sure many people can relate to having to work unbelievably hard just to put food on the table. Food that you might not even have time to eat because you have to go work to get more money. On top of that, you'll also get to hang out with one of the 3 love interests, Freya, Lebkuchen, and Rosenmarine. Sometimes you'll have to decide whether to spend your time making Teifel to feed yourself, or buy items to ease your sanity, or go on a date with the girl of your choice. The dates are pretty straightforward. If you choose the right dialogue, you'll be rewarded with a heart for the girl you choose. At night is when the horror sections of the game begins. The witching hour. This is where the survival horror aspects come into play. Though linear in nature, you'll be presented with a puzzle to solve and a bizarre, otherworldly area to explore. Hopefully you've been managing your Teifel to buy health items as well, because there is no way to restore your health other than items. The puzzles, while not overly complicated, are quite unique. And it's even cooler when you have to play a dark and twisted version of the minigames you play during the daytime hours to get important items called testaments from the followers of him. There is the tender flesh, the sweetest nectar, and the good company. And these testaments play an important role in what ending you'll get, so pay attention and save often. Speaking of saving often, for all the praise I've been singing, there is one section in particular a little bit later in the game that I wasn't too fond of. The Bedewed Forest. There's a section where you have to navigate in the pitch black, not knowing what is around the corner. Despite the suffocating darkness, you can't turn your lantern on no matter what. Doing so will cause these horrifying statues to rush towards you and insta-kill Elise if they just so much as touch her. There are also thorns all along the walls, and with the way the lighting works in this game, you'll only be able to see in a radius that barely even shows Elise. It was without a doubt terrifying in its own way, but it ended up being more frustrating than anything, just leading to damage that could have been avoided. And you'll need all the health you can get for what happens at the end of the level, the first and only boss fight of the game. Which is cool as hell, but that fight too is just trial and error until you finally get the right answer and not die from the onslaught of attacks. Despite this, it was the only part that I felt truly frustrated playing. The rest of the game was a delight to play through. Maybe I'm just dumb, as I got every single answer wrong and had to restart every time. There is another major connection to Little Goody Two Shoes and Pocket Mirror, but to talk about it, I must talk about some mild spoilers for both Little Goody Two Shoes and Pocket Mirror, so be warned. I'll give you a second to skip to the timestamp on the screen to avoid these spoilers if you so desire. The events of Pocket Mirror supposedly take place after the bad endings of Little Goody Two Shoes. The main character, G, suffers from amnesia. The only thing she knows is a golden pocket mirror she carries around. It's later revealed from notes found throughout the game and a picture in a library that she is Elise's daughter. But wait, isn't Elise attracted to girls? Yes. See, this him character is, spoiler, a demon, and during the bad endings, the things he desires from Elise, the testaments you've been collecting throughout the game, come into play. The sweetest nectar is her blood, the good company is her lover, but it's what the tender flesh is that matters the most, her firstborn. So for her to have a firstborn, she doesn't end up with any of the girls, instead a random man named Roman. Under the influence of him, he sends a coach to pick up Elise from Kieferberg, to live in his castle with him. So while yes, Elise got what she desired, she ultimately is unhappy with her life. She must live with the knowledge that to get what she wanted, she sacrificed her lover and ended up with a man she has no love for and literally no attraction for, as she's lesbian. If you're curious, we do learn who this he is more in Pocket Mirror, but also at the very end of the game. But that's a story for another day. To wrap up, let's talk about how to get the endings, as it may be a bit daunting. After all, there's a total of 10 different endings. It took me about 12.5 hours to beat my first playthrough. I had chosen to romance Rosenmarine, but didn't get her affection high enough, so I ended up getting her worst ending. Each of the love interests have their own set of endings, plus with the true ending, you'll need to do at least 3 different playthroughs to get all of them. So you're looking at least a 30+ hour experience now that you know what you're doing. I'll explain everything as spoiler-free as possible, so you kinda know what to expect, but can still experience the twists and turns that the story has in store for you, if you decide to play this game. So each of the 3 love interests has a branching ending, should you collect all the testaments. To get these endings, you'll have to have at least 4 hearts with them. Then, depending on your choice at the finale, you'll either get their good ending or a bad ending. So that's 6 endings right there. To get the worst endings, you'll just have to have 3 or less hearts with them. You'll realize once you get to the finale, you're missing an important item, and that's where the fun begins. Rosemarine is a little special as she has a unique worst ending, while Lebkuchen and Freya share their worst endings. There's a horrible ending for not using any of the important items you got throughout the game during the finale. And lastly is the true ending, which is a bit complex and requires a lot of exploring and looking into some suspicious items you may come across. This ending reveals some things that will change your entire perspective on the story, tipping everything on its head. But again, that's a story for another day. There's also an ending that isn't listed in the wardrobe, which to achieve, simply get your suspicion with the townsfolk all the way up. So technically there's 11 endings, but only 10 count towards the list. Overall, Little Goody Two Shoes is such a cozy and fascinating game that I simply cannot recommend enough. For a game that I just picked up on a whim one day, I was so incredibly pleased with it. So many nuanced mechanics work together to make it a truly unique and fun experience that you can tell the developers poured their hearts into. In this day and age, when it seems like so many game developers are afraid of stepping outside of the box and trying something odd and different, it was such a breath of fresh air. Not only that, but it was so refreshing seeing really tasteful and well-written queer representation in art like this. One that isn't forced, but genuine and wholesome. The game is not perfect and has its flaws, but for what it is, it's just so unique. It had swiftly become one of my favorite games of all time, and the more I dug into it, the more I fell in love with it. Check out AstralShift's other game, Pocket Mirror, as well. You won't regret it. If you take anything away from this video and this series that I'm making, let it be this. If you're on the fence about an indie game, my advice would just be to buy it and give it a shot. Who knows, it may just become one of your favorite games of all time. That's gonna be all from me. I love you all. Take care.